Can a pilot like Lewis Hamilton go from fighting for the podium to sink without explanation? What if I told you that Ferrari modified his car without warning him? Stay, because what just filtered not only changes how we see that weekend, but what we think of power within Maranello. Hungary 2025. A demanding, closed technical circuit. A layout where the pilot makes a difference more than the engine. It is one of those places where the connection between the car and who drives it becomes absolute, where errors are punished with rawness and small details decide entire races. It was, in theory, the perfect setting for Lewis Hamilton. With all his experience, began to show why Ferrari had opted for him to lead his project. It came from 2 adaptation races, yes, but Hungary was the expected point that was expected for claim. But what happened that weekend was the opposite. It wasn't just a bad result. It was an anomaly, a total disconnection, an inexplicable action, until everything was leaked. From free training, the narrative seemed clear. Hamilton was comfortable. His braking traces were clean. His long round rhythm was competitive. Telemetry showed a progressive symbiosis between the pilot and the SF25. Even team engineers praised their ability to find balance in a circuit that punishes any failure in tuning. But when arriving on Saturday, everything changed dramatically. Hamilton was another, offline, forced, fighting to control a car that, overnight, had lost all its logic of behavior. From outside, it seemed like a piloting error or a bad day. But those who know Hamilton knew that something did not square. And that was when the information that detonated the scandal began to circulate. Hamilton's SF25 had been modified during the early morning in secret, without his knowledge or that of his track engineer. No one communicated it. No one approved it with him. Simply, Saturday morning, his car was no longer the one he had refined for days. The balance had disappeared. The car had been transformed into an unpredictable beast. And worst of all, that decision was made within the Ferrari team itself. What happened in Hungary, in summary, was the crudest manifestation of an internal fracture. Hamilton, stripped of control over his car, was a victim not of his rivals but of his own structure. And that detail changes everything. Because we do not talk about a strategy failure or a bad decision on the track. We talk about intentional intervention, executed by a group within the team that did not even feel the need to notify one of the most laureate pilots in history. The message was clear. In Ferrari, the technical power does not always respond to the pilot, but to other darker interests. And all this happened in a weekend where Ferrari needed to show unity, where Hamilton and Leclerc were expected to start working as a complementary pair. Instead, the seed of a distrust that could explode at any time was sown. Because when a pilot feels that his car is no longer under his control, he not only breaks confidence in the machine, the team confidence is broken. And that, in modern Formula One, is an internal fracture sentence. When a pilot like Lewis Hamilton dedicates hours of simulator, free sessions, technical work and conversation with his engineer to adjust each car parameter to his driving style, he does not do so by whim. He does it because in Formula One, a tenth of a second can separate the absolute success of the ridiculous. And that tenth is not in the horses of force. It is in the detail, in the fine adjustment, in that feeling that the car responds to your thought before your hands. And that was precisely what Hamilton had achieved during Friday's practices in Hungary. He had built a surgical balance. He had succeeded. But all that was destroyed by 3 decisions executed in the shadow. And if that were not enough, all the adjustments that Hamilton had made to give stability to the car were dismantled. Literally. Each equilibrium component that had been built from the braking distribution to the maps of torque was replaced by a completely opposite configuration. Not only was his work respected, he was denied the possibility of competing with a car designed for him. He was given a new machine without warning him. An enemy machine. Telemetric data does not lie. On Friday, Hamilton's brake pressure graphs were the reflection of a confident pilot. Soft, consistent, efficient. On Saturday, those same graphs looked more like those of a debutante pilot, forced to correct every time he tried to enter curve. Its braking line, its acceleration, even its steering angles, everything was altered by the side effects of a car that no longer obeyed. And the definitive punishment came from the tires. With an unstable rear axle, the tires began to skate more frequently, generating a localized overheating that completely ruined the useful life of the gums. In a circuit like Hungaroring, where each curve chains the next, losing temperature or pressure in a rear tire is lethal. The SF25 began to overheat the rear compounds, to unbalance the temperature between both sides of the axle, and in a matter of turns the car no longer had rhythm. Not because Hamilton had changed his style, because they changed the car. And while all that happened, Charles Leclerc's car, identical in theory, worked perfectly. His traces were clean. His tires were stable. His rhythm was solid. In the same circuit, under the same conditions, one of the two Ferrari behaved as it should. The other like a failed experiment. And that led to an inevitable conclusion. This was not a technical failure. It was a choice. Someone inside Ferrari decided that this Saturday, Hamilton would not have the car he had worked to build. The modification of the SF25 was not authorized by his career engineer, Riccardo Adami, nor was she communicated to Hamilton. The decision did not go through the track team as the usual protocol dictates. The order came from the so-called Main Performance Group, a department that operates at a higher hierarchical level, directly linked to Ferrari's technical and sports directorate, but does not respond directly to garage engineers. This group, in theory, is designed to optimize the competitiveness of monoplays using centralized data, modeling by simulators and long-term strategic projections. But in practice, what has demonstrated is its ability to intervene above the sports decisions of the team that travels every weekend with cars. And while this happens, Charles Leclerc seems to move more comfortable within the structure. His data remained unaltered. His environment was not touched. Your car optimized. The question that many are asked is whether the performance group really acts for data or by preferences. And in that case, is Leclerc the institutional favorite? And Hamilton simply a temporary tool? Lewis Hamilton is not a rookie. He is not a pilot who leaves the emotions of the moment or someone who accuses without evidence. His career, built on more than a decade of domain, has been based on precision, experience, and control. But in Hungary, all that collapsed. Not only because the car did not respond, but because he was manipulated without him knowing. And when the truth emerged, his answer was cold, calculated, devastating. During Sunday's technical meeting, his speech was short, but full of intention. He asked a single question: was this a mistake or a decision? No one responded clearly, because what was at stake was not just the result of a Grand Prix. It was the credibility of the team, the pilot's authority, and the survival of a relationship that, until that moment, seemed to be built with solid foundations. Ferrari had signed Hamilton to lead. But if what happened in Hungary was repeated again, that leadership would be nothing more than an illusion. From that moment on, Hamilton changed his approach. His relationship with the team ceased to be emotional and became transactional. He began to get more involved in the technical part, asking for cross-validation of each change in the car. He moved away from optimistic speech and took refuge in precision. Each comment in the media became more content, more measured, more political. It was no longer just about adapting to the car. It was about recovering control over their environment. And this had immediate consequences within Maranello. Internal meetings were convened to review the approval procedures of the performance group. Some engineers were temporarily displaced. It was leaked that Frédéric Vasseur requested a complete report of the interventions carried out in Car 44, and that an investigation was launched to determine whether the communication protocol between departments had been violated. It was not about avoiding a crisis. It was about containing an internal war that had already begun. For the average fan, seeing Hamilton roll in the middle part of the platoon may seem a surprise. For the most attentive, a disappointment. But for those who have followed their career with magnifying glass, what happened in Hungary represents something much more serious. It means that even the most experienced, more laureate, most influential pilot of his generation can be left out within the most iconic structure of motoring. That his name, his history, his hierarchy can be ignored in favor of internal decisions whose purpose has not yet been explained at all. And that raises a brutal question. How much is the voice of a pilot in the modern Formula One? To what extent is a structure like Ferrari willing to listen to its key figures when the pressure to win eclipses everything else? Because what we saw was not a technical mistake. It was a reflection of how some structures work from within. How institutional ambition can silence human experience. How sometimes the fastest car is not the most fair. Hamilton, meanwhile, has responded as only the greats know how to do it. With temperance, with intelligence, with intention. It has not exploded, as observed, as compiled. He has begun to take control of his surroundings, not as a pilot who complains, but as a leader who demands. Because what he lost in Hungary was not a career, it was trust. And rebuilding that within a team like Ferrari, it is a task that very few are prepared to face. But if someone can do it, it's him. Because Hamilton did not reach Ferrari to be a symbol. He arrived to be an architect, to take a fractured team inside and give order, to break the culture of chaos disguised as tradition. And if you do it, If you manage to align talent, structure, and philosophy, you will not only add one more chapter to your legacy. The Ferrari's genetic code in the 21st century will have rewritten. That is not just sports greatness, it is history. So I ask you directly, do you think Hamilton can change Ferrari from within? Or will this story end like so many others, with the pilot coming out the back door while the team is still trapped in its own mistakes?